Everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Northview Podcast. My name is Sean, and I am joined with Nathan Rector. Nathan, man, I'm so glad to be with you right now. We are coming out of this amazing weekend where we had a vision and worship night this past Sunday night. Can you just tell me how you feeling about that? Was it as amazing for you as it was for me?
Man, it was a good night. It was a great night. We had our best gathering by far, our biggest gathering that we've had since COVID started. And, it was so good to see some people that we hadn't seen for, and some of them literally 6 months. And I know for them, not having an opportunity to worship or to be a part of any kind of on-site gathering, even though we were outside. I mean, that was really part of the draw, I think. And part of what made it special is it's definitely been demonstrated by some of our people that there's a higher comfort level right now with being outside. There's obviously challenges and
Right.
things with doing that, and weather is chief among them.
Right.
And so we've had a lot of different reasons why we haven't done these every single weekend.
Right.
And there's been lots of wins that we've taken over the last several months together with our in-house or inside the building gatherings. But, to get outside, we did something like this at Labor Day weekend, and it was a big hit. This Sunday night was even bigger. So I think just having that energy was very, very powerful. And, it also was a chance for us to kind of put back on the radar and really speak into. It was our Open the Door. We're approaching 1 year on our Open the Door 2-year generosity initiative. And so it was just great to cast vision for what we set out to do and what God's been doing and where we're going. And people were fired up. We had a great prayer moment at the end of it that I think was really, really powerful. And it was just a great night. So always look forward to vision and worship nights, but this will be one that we'll remember for sure.
Yeah, I think people, let's just imagine somebody listens to this a few years later, which would be pretty amazing. And they just hear about us talking about an outdoor service. I think instinctively you're just going to know, oh, that was during the COVID times, because it's just one of those signals, I guess, of things that we did to change or do something different. Well, it was awesome, man, and I really appreciate it. Your message and that prayer moment of writing on the pavement within this area that our new building will be situated on was really, really awesome. So you, this past weekend, started a brand new sermon series called Focus, and really Focus is the title for our ABCD series, which is something that we do every year. And during this beginning of your message, you shared this question that I thought was really impactful. You talked about how, are we going to focus on ministry or misery? You actually said it the other way around, misery or ministry. But why do you think our default is to focus on our misery? And then how do we take a step towards focusing on ministry?
Yeah. I think the default reaction to pain is just, it hurts. And we want to move away from that. And also, especially when it comes to commitment, when it comes to things that cost us, things that are going to be challenging. I mean, when we start to encounter roadblocks and we hit some difficulties along the way, just that excuse side, starts to come up. And so COVID has rightfully shut down a lot of different things.
Right.
But it's also created an incredible, almost unarguable excuse for a lot of things.
Right.
And, this series was kind of about, and this is ABCD, anything related to that, our discipleship process is something we're talking about on a regular basis, yearly basis,
right?
Usually every 18 months at least. And so it's just kind of a chance to say, listen, this is not going to be an excuse for us to get knocked off our mission. This is still what we've been called to do. And a lot of this connects into our personal discipleship. And so the context even of how this all has to get played out really doesn't have anything to do with the corporate gathering. So this is what we are about, period. And if we had to be about it in a house church scenario, if we had to be about it in a persecuted scenario where we weren't allowed to gather, or I don't know, I couldn't even think of any other ideas, but just if it's bigger than just gathered church. In fact, this is kind of like how how do we walk out our faith on the other days? And how do we have a scoreboard as a church? And that's kind of what ABC is for us a bit,
Right.
is a scoreboard to be able to know, are we winning? Are we doing the things that God has called us to do? Are we fulfilling the Great Commission that He's put into our hands? Are we making disciples? Are we helping people in their
Right.
journey?
So I think a lot of us actually do want to take that step towards focusing on our mission. Could you help clarify though, like what is the mission of a Christ follower?
Yeah, I think it's both. It's probably twofold. It's being a disciple of Jesus, and it's making disciples of Jesus. We say it around here that we exist to help people take their next step with God, and that's a way that we can say very simply and very quickly. There's always a next step for you. There's always a next step for you as you lead other people in their next step. So I think it's twofold. I think it's both being a disciple, being made more and more into the likeness of Jesus,
Hmm.
but it's also how, and this is part of being a disciple too, but it's how then does Christ work, not just in me, but through me,
Right.
and help me be a catalyst. We've seen throughout history, God uses us. He uses people to be his catalyst, his messengers, and to help other people take their steps in the journey. And so we want to embrace that.
Hmm.
And this moment, as difficult as it is, we're not going to let it build in an excuse for us to be thrown off our game.
Right. And I think, the idea of focusing on our mission versus our misery, if you're a weightlifter, you're always thinking about the process, right? You're thinking about the end result, not necessarily the pain that you might be experiencing. Or if you're an athlete going through a grueling practice, it would be easy in that moment to focus on, whatever it is that the coach is pushing you to do. But if you have the end in mind, it changes everything on how you're
Sure.
going to focus. So discipleship has always been the heartbeat of the church, ever since the Great Commission of Jesus, and discipleship is very important to us. Where did ABCD originate from, and why does this process work in leading people on a journey of following Jesus?
Yeah, ABCD is a stolen idea, kind of reworked and changed a bit. But the genesis or the original idea goes back to a guy named Jim Putman. In 2008, I was serving at a church called The Crossing, and a team of guys from there went out and spent some time with Jim and some of his team in Post Falls, Idaho. He'd written a book called Church is a Team Sport, and he talked a lot about discipleship and small groups, and they were just doing some things that were so innovative that we had to go see it with our own eyes, and wanted to ask some questions and learn some things from them. And one of the things that they did, I think, a great job of was making discipleship measurable, and not in a superficial or pharisaical kind of way
Right.
where it could be like super works based, but just Jim was a wrestler. He was a two-time All-American wrestler. He just had this sports background, and so he was big about how can we set a scoreboard where we know we're winning and where we know we're being faithful to what God has called us to do. So he had a process that he had developed, he and his team, that was designed to help someone who was in a position of spiritual leadership, maybe a parent or a small group leader. How do I walk with somebody from their spiritual infancy all the way through their childhood years or spiritual young adult years,
Right.
their parenting years, that kind of thing? And so he came up with this idea called SCMD, and it was basically I share Christ with someone who's spiritually an infant or even spiritually dead. As they start to mature, we're going to connect them, because part of growing, it's important that you're connected to relationships and that you
Right.
have mentors and a church family to help you grow. Just like a child needs parents, young believers need spiritual parents to raise them. So we want to connect them to those influences. And then the M is about ministry. So it's about releasing people to ministry and helping them cross the threshold of personal transformation, where it's not about me anymore, and now I'm serving. And then the D stood for disciple, and that's where I mentor and intentionally spiritually lead like Jesus did. Well, I loved it. I loved it. I could see it in my head. It made a lot of sense. The only thing I didn't love about it was its memorableness.
Right.
Because, I think key to having a strategy of the church is that when you call a play, people know it and they've understood it, and they're all on the same play. This was something that I in my mind was hoping that we could connect students to and adults to, and just,
Right.
that could scale no matter how big a church got. And so I just kind of had a quick thought about turning the thought process around from the perspective of the spiritually mature and how I can help the immature, to what if we just told the follower from the beginning, here's your journey.
Mm.
And we took it from that perspective, and here's your journey. And the other thing was, could we make it a little more memorable, so that what I couldn't remember, is it SD, MC, SMCD, SD,
Right.
and you could just see that people are going to get it confused and get it all tripped up. Could you go A, B, C, D? So I just scratched it out while I'm listening. I mean, it's Post Falls, Idaho, sitting here listening to this guy. And I just wrote out on a little piece of paper A, B, C, D. And I knew that A could be accept Christ. The D could be disciple. So that's where I
Right.
started. And then I moved to the middle. Belong seemed like a natural step, a natural way to communicate this idea of relationship and communicating relationship, a step to belong, and then contribute as C. So I kind of scratched it out. To be honest, I had care at the beginning for the C, and then it kind of morphed a little bit over time and became
Right.
contribute. But SC or ABCD was based off of Putnam's SCMD, and so I have used that at the Crossing then from 2008 to 2010 as our discipleship process, ABCD. When I went to Valley Real Life in Spokane, Washington, which, by the way, is a plant of Jim Putman's church. The first plant they ever planted was Valley Real Life, about 25 minutes away in Spokane Valley, Washington, just across the border there from Post Falls, Idaho. And so Jim became a mentor of mine, and we got to share laughs for a lot of years about which way was the better way to say
Right.
it, ABCD versus SCMD. And he always had the high ground because he wrote the book, and he had all the notoriety from it. But I had a few people pulling for me
Right.
on his own staff, so I took that as a credit. But no, I mean and then we've used it here from 2015 to the present, and it's just something that's simple and memorable, and that we can all use and share pretty readily. So that's why we do it.
Yeah, no, I love the backstory of that. So A stands for accept, and I believe that everyone would agree that accept is a first step.
Yep.
We're all taking that step. I'm curious, do you think accept is a step that we have to take later on in life, or is it just like this one time moment in the Christian journey?
Yeah, I think it's for sure a moment, but the moment could have a process. Many people don't come to Jesus in a snap. There's a whole series of events. Even if one singular moment really seems significant, you can usually look backwards and see a whole host of events that have connected you to that moment. But it's absolutely an intentional moment, a singular intentional moment. Maybe a threshold moment would be a way to say it. Where it's memorable. It's something where something happened that was almost an initiation or launch pad type moment. But it's certainly also something that the essence of is leveraged on a daily basis. Accepting the love and lordship of Jesus in your life is both something that needs to be done initially, right, but also done continually, not in the same sense, not
Right.
in the same way. Jamie and I got married 18 years ago this year, and we didn't just she didn't walk out of a house one day and I walked out of a house one day and we started walking down a street together, and then we kept walking down a street together, and then we just stayed. And now 18 years later, we're still walking down,
Right.
we're just continuing to. There were moments along the way of great intentionality, moments where we shared our hearts with one another, moments where we defined our relationship. I mean, a moment where I proposed to her, a moment then where we got married, and that ceremony, if you will, was very intentional. It was designed to be memorable. It was designed to be the start of the official relationship
Right.
with each other. And so we don't renew our vows every day or every year. In fact, we have never renewed our vows since then. We might someday. But we are now living in the reality of already having been married. And so
Right.
we made that intentional step. So accept is really both and, but I say we put a lot of emphasis with this primarily usually on the initial response
Right.
to surrender your life to Jesus.
Right. And in the scriptures, we see that, the Christian life is sometimes called a race. And, I'm not very familiar with races. I've never done one, but I would imagine that if you're going to do a marathon, you've got the start moment where you begin the race, and then maybe mile 3, 4, whatever, 7, 8, you begin to struggle through this. Was this the right decision? But you kind of energize yourself, or you refocus yourself to continue on. You don't go back 7 miles to the beginning of the race to start all over again because you had a doubt about it. No, it's in that process and that movement where you're going forward, right, that you get re-engaged. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, for me, it'd be about mile 1.5 that I would be struggling and asking questions about what I was doing.
Right.
But yeah, you don't have to restart. You pick up and you start from where you are, and you keep running.
So one of the key elements that you talked about in this journey of accepting is this outward response of baptism, and I believe baptism is one of the most beautiful acts that we get the privilege of doing as a Christian. And if someone is listening today and they've never taken that step towards baptism, why is it an important step of faith to take?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why someone might not have taken that step. Some of it's a bit mysterious to some, or it's been misunderstood, and sometimes it's a bit it can be a bit divisive, or you start wondering about the implications of what it might mean about someone you loved, who didn't get baptized, but they did love God. So this conversation can sometimes be challenging. But the bottom line is, it is a simple yet powerful way that God has designed, and you can look through Scripture and you can see this connection. It wouldn't have been the way I would have drawn it up. I don't know that I could have understood it. Thought,
Right.
The way to show love is to get in water and to go underneath and to be pulled. It wouldn't be the way we do it, but there's clearly something in the mind of God that connects with that. And for him, he recognizes that and sees that. And it's something that can be seen and recognized by other people. When they see it happening, they know what it is.
Right.
In the same way, we used a marriage example earlier. If I see them in the park and I see two people walking, and then the guy drops down to his knee and offers up a ring box to the girl that he's walking with, I know what's happening in that moment. I don't have to hear any of their words. I know precisely that there's a pledge moment going on.
Right.
Like he's asking her to marry him, and she's going to say yes or no. And that yes or no is going to have a big time implication one way or the other.
Right.
That is going to propel this relationship to a next place. Baptism is kind of in a similar way that it's this intentional moment of pledging our heart, our life. It's outward. I'm saying, I am identifying with you. And Jesus was baptized, so we're following his example in that he's called us to be baptized, and he's even called us to baptize others. So it's obviously important to him,
Right?
And it's something that unites and ties us together with other believers for all of history and all of time. It's something that
you mentioned something about that in your message about how it's across all cultures. Can you go explain that some more?
Well, I mean, I've been, and Sean, you've been in other countries and been a part of church services in other countries and witnessed it too. But I've been a part of baptisms where I couldn't speak the language, and so I couldn't tell you exactly what their confession of Christ sounded like. I couldn't tell you what their testimony really was. I couldn't tell you.
Right.
But when they got in the water and they did that part, I knew exactly what was going on, and I knew that's something that I had experienced myself. And in that, we were united. And when you think about, for all of time, an event or something that could be done intentionally, that's not everyday type stuff. It's not just something you're doing every day, but something you could do with intention that virtually everybody, everywhere could intentionally participate in.
Right.
The list starts getting really small.
Right.
And, God had that wisdom to, use this as a unifier for us all. So really just a special thing. And I would just encourage anybody that's on the fence about it, not in some sort of mystical way, like there's magic water or anything like that, but there's something here that God has for you, and don't undersell it. Don't undersell it.
Right. So my last question for you for this podcast, this accept message was directed at two different audiences. One, maybe the audience we were just talking to that needs to maybe take that step for the very first time. But you also shared towards an audience of people that God's calling to lead others through this ABCD process. So what's some advice that you could give us to help begin that journey with somebody else?
Yeah, these next several weeks, we're going to talk about each phase, and I think they're going to be helpful to have an understanding of what each phase looks like. But I think one of the biggest benefits of having an intentional discipleship process, and there's a lot of ways to say this or explain this to others, ABCD gives you a memorable way to interact with people who let's just say our goal is to make disciples, right? So that's what we're called to do. And let's say we meet somebody and we don't know where they're at in a relationship with God, if they have a relationship with God. And so anytime I meet someone and begin a relationship with someone, this is somewhere that my mind is going. Let's say I run into a parent of one of my boys is playing on a sports team, and I meet someone. I'm trying to figure out, do they have a relationship with God? What is that about? That's about A, have they accepted Jesus Christ as Lord of Savior? Are they a believer? Are they someone who believes in God? If I figure out or find out over time that that's true, then I think, okay, good. If not, I'll move on to B. If not, A, that's where we go. We don't need to go anywhere further. That's where my prayers are focused. It's about leading that person to that initial step of faith in Christ. If they are a Christian, I find out they are, then it's B. Do they have a church family? Are they connected to that church family? Are they a part of a network of Christian relationships that they're intentionally invested in? If not, there we go. That's what I'm going to try to help encourage them to do. How do I do that? Well, there's a million ways that we could help do that. But I know the big umbrella that fits under is, man, they need to find a place to belong. God has created them to belong on a team, to belong to a family.
Right.
And without that, we're just going to flounder in our spiritual walk. So that's where my emphasis is. If I know, A, yes, they've accepted Christ. B, yes, they belong to a church. Do they just go to church sometimes? Are they just there? Are they on a membership role? Are they really connected? C has to do with, time and resources and giving my abilities, not just for use for myself. That's where the encouragement would go. If I find out, man, that's a cylinder on the engine that isn't firing. D, and this is, that last week sometimes feels like for people like kind of a throwaway week, but I think it's as powerful as any, because there are a lot of Christians who have A, accepted Christ, B, belong to a church, and C, contribute to that church. But D has to do with examining, am I serving in the most strategic and intentional way, and multiplying intentionally into multiple generations of people? Because otherwise my everything good just dies off with me. All the ABC dies when I die, but D lives on after you're gone. And so, it's just a simple exercise that you can run through in your head anytime you're trying to, whether it's your children or whether it's a brother or sister or a neighbor or someone you met, to try to think, how could I help them to take their next step, or what is their next step? This is how I try to discover and help them find out what their next step is.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait for next week to be able to dive in and talk about the B for belong, and then continue on in our conversation. So as we wrap up, I just want to encourage anybody that's listening or watching potentially on YouTube, on our app, that if you want to take that step of accepting Jesus, that we are always here for that, and that we always want to have that conversation. And so you can reach out through a direct message on Facebook. You can call our offices. You can find us on the website, northviewchristian.org. And whatever it is that we can do to help you engage in that first step of accepting Jesus, we want to do that. And if you know somebody that you want to maybe get some advice or talk about how to help somebody else take that step, again, this is what we are all about, is helping people do that. And so reach out again in those different kinds of ways. You can stay connected with us as a church by attending. We have services on Thursday nights at 6:30 p.m. and then also on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:45. You can also engage with us on our online church campus, which we have services that premiere at 9 and 10:45 on Sundays. And then you can also catch those on demand on YouTube as well. Friends, it's been awesome being with you. Nathan, any last words?
No, this week, I can't wait to move on to talk about to belong. I got my Bears hat, so I belong to them, and they're going to be playing the Colts this weekend. So I think I might be a little bit of a rowdy crowd.
Nice.
On Sunday. I might just have to wear my Khalil Mack jersey or something, and
I think it'd be welcomed.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be welcome, but I think it'd be fun.
Well, we'll know if they won or lost depending on what you're wearing next week when we get together again.
There you go. Sounds good.
All right, friends, we love you. Thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.